my name's Adam Spring and this is a remotely interested video. So, Vintage Computing Festival Southeast was coming up on April the 29th and 30th. And I decided to get a little get-together of Amiga enthusiasts for something called the Viva Amiga Q&A panel. So a friend of mine, Zach Weddington, did a documentary based around the Amiga computer, and it really was the film personification, shall we say, of a community-driven film. All of the wonderful 3D graphics were done by Paul Kitchen, who got into what he does now in the realm of 3D graphics through the Amiga computer. And yeah, it was an opportunity to give something back to the community and have a panel of former Amiga engineers, enthusiasts, and all aspects of the history of the Amiga. So this video feeds into that in the sense that I got Joe Decuir, who was a hardware engineer on the Amiga computer, and he also basically worked on the Atari VCS, the Atari 2600, and the 400 and the 800 with, you know, the technical father of the Amiga computer, Jay Miner. Anyway, we talk about a variety of things, and he even corrects me a little bit on my history, because when we were talking about Ron Nicholson, I did get the Nintendo 64 confused with the Super Nintendo. So I'll apologise for that right now. The technology geek in me couldn't let that slip. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Joe is a wonderful guy, and regardless of when it is, please do follow the comment box down in YouTube and ask questions, because a large point of doing this video is because Joe really wanted to make it, couldn't make it, but I was like, well, you know, you can be there in spirit. So basically this video was done so we could have a little bit of interaction and a little bit of Q&A with him. Anyway, Joe is computer history gold, and I will leave it over to him.
So when did you first meet Jay Miner?
I was one of the luckiest days of my life. So I met Jay Miner the first time when he hired me to be his basically lackey. In the world of the Sith, I'm the assistant. You know, the understudy, yes, the wizard in training, to work on the Atari video game console in, it was around the Thanksgiving weekend of 1975. And I started the week after Christmas of 1975. And I started working at Atari's think tank up in Nevada City called Cyan Engineering. And when it got working, I brought down that project from Nevada City and apprenticed for Jay Miner directly. And I worked for him through February of 1979, when after management changes at Atari, he left to go work on the first CMOS heart pacemakers. I stuck around at Atari until June of 1979 because I wanted to make sure our second system was yielding well in production before I resigned to go work on Ancestors of the Internet.
Wow. And so how did you, because, you know, we met at Amiga 30th in California. Where did the kernels for the idea for the Amiga came from? Because in your excellent IEEE CES article, you know, you talk about the context of the time and how it was looking to, or it ended up marrying video game consoles with personal computers. So how did that come about? Well,
first of all, video games themselves were a way to bring the stories home. In 1975, stories were owned by networks or authors or the people who wrote music, or who wrote screenplays and made movies. They didn't happen in your house because, you know, the art of storytelling had sort of gone away. We depended on other people for our stories. And the first thing that happened is that video games brought stories home, because it brings in a constrained story. You're going to play tank against that person, or you're going to play Pong against that person, but you now have a little tiny bit of reality TV right there in front of you. And I looked at this and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, but we also, this is a way to bring computing home. And so when we were composing the Atari second system, we were trying to think, is this going to be the greatest home video game ever? Or is this going to be a great personal computer, or both? We actually wound up shipping the same hardware packaged two different ways. The Atari 400 was a game console with a, membrane keyboard, and the other one was a full personal computer with all the attachments. And we had these ideas, and so Jay went out to do other stuff, I went out to do other stuff, but we were still thinking about what's next and how far can we go. So in early 1982, unbeknownst to me, Jay meets up with Larry Kaplan, who was one of the veterans of Atari video games and of Activision, and they start thinking about building a new system that was animation oriented, not computer oriented. Although Jay Miner always used to say that a great home computer will play great games. For him, that was a definition. So they're starting to think about having this new system, and they hire somebody named Dave Morse out of Tonka Toys. And Dave Morse thinks that what we really want to do is make animation so good that they can render cartoons in real time. That was the original objective of the company called High Toro. So Jay Miner calls me up. We haven't been social for a couple of months. He said, let's go up to the Sacramento Delta. So I go up and meet Jay, and we go up the Sacramento Delta. I do a tiny bit of water skiing, that sort of thing. And we have these concepts about where could we go. For perspective, in the article that I sent you, there is a scan of my last day's notebook from Atari where we sketch out where we could go with our third system. And we started with that to build the concepts for our third system. So we jumped to a 16-bit processor, 68,000 as luck would have it, and carried forward the ideas we pioneered in the Atari computer about having a machine that manipulated memory and did lots of DMA channels, something that did video and audio and disk I/O and communications, and then a third chip to handle all the non-memory intensive I/O. And we built a new system out of that concept and then started architecting those chips. I worked for Jay as badge number 3, starting in fall of 1982 through going into 1983 and whatnot.
Wow. And one of the things I found very interesting about the article that was in IEEE Consumer, Electronics Show magazine is how much was there a conscious effort to work with the displays that were available at the time, like TVs and things like that?
Well, we started off with the same set of assumptions that we'd like to do TVs, but in fact, IBM PC and its clones changed that market. The IBM PC was announced in the fall of 1982 also, coincident, and they drove, a big universe of high-resolution color monitors. So by the time we got done with the development of the system, we were no longer bound to TVs at all. Nobody that I'm aware of ever built an Amiga version designed specifically for NTSC or PAL or CCAM TVs. They were designed for monitors, full stop.
Yep. And, looking back on it now, what do you say the greatest legacy that the Amiga had?
Where to start? The Amiga was, there are two pieces that I thought the Amiga did that were pretty far ahead. From a graphics standpoint, they had what we called a bit blitter. Now, we had hired Ron Nicholson, and he had worked on the ancestors of the Apple Macintosh. And he knew what software developers were doing in software for bit manipulation in the Macintosh single-bit level bitmap. And so he's talking to us about, well, here's what it has to do. And what we did is we built a hardware implementation and then generalized it. So we built this bit blitter machine that could touch every single bit of a 640 by 480 pixel frame in 1/60th of a second. It was that fast. And it could do line draw, and it could do area fill. So it could do polygons, and then it could cut and paste networks of polygons into larger structures. It did a really nice job of the early flight simulators in the mid-80s, excuse me. Stepping back, the other thing it did is it had the most advanced audio in anything at the time. It had a 4-channel sampler. It could construct a 4K word image of pretty much anything, play it back at different speeds, and it was all DMA. So the processor didn't have to field interrupts and transfer bytes from, some piece of memory into the hardware. The hardware all did it for you.
Wow. And
one of the demos that we did, someone recorded the dog Mitchie barking.
That's wonderful.
And we hooked it up to a keyboard and some software so that if you pushed notes to your left, you would get woof, woof, woof sounds. And if you pushed it to the right, you'd get yip, 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 yip sounds. And you could play 4-channel dog chorus with the keyboard with this demo. It was just hilarious.
Well, so Mitchie earned that paw print in the first Amiga case.
That's right. She earned it. She was badge 0.
Wow.
I was badge 3.
Wow. So in terms of then, the people that are listening to this, whether it's VCF, Southeast people, or whether it's, people that are interested in, just in the Amiga in general and the history of personal computing, what do you have to say for them to them for still having this fondness for the system and the appreciation of what it was able to do and what it did do?
Well, first of all, I always appreciate meeting every single happy customer. A lot of people say, I'd like to work for myself. And when you work for yourself, you're still working for all the customers. And I'm always happy to meet somebody who loves this stuff. I want to add one thing, by the way, that wasn't hardware, that was software. The hardware system did the video and audio, as I just mentioned, but the huge thing which we didn't anticipate as hardware developers was the work of RJ and Company. They built the first multimedia, multitasking, windowed operating system on the planet, and they built it 10 years before Apple or Microsoft met the same criteria.
Yep.
They were way ahead. The hardware it shipped in 1985, and the next machine that had similar capabilities was the Super Nintendo in 1992. So it was 7 years ahead in the hardware. And I don't know how long it took people to come up with similar audio.
Yeah. And
so it was just way ahead.
And wasn't Ron involved with the Super Nintendo?
Ron Nicholson?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
Ron Nicholson and I were hired by Jay, and we worked together on the hardware architecture. And then, like I say, I had tried to stay out of the Tramiel's way. So I kind of I disappeared. Ron stuck around until they moved everything off to Pennsylvania. But stepping back, we built this machine. It seemed to be ahead of its time. For those of you who haven't seen it, find a book called The Future Was Here. by Jimmy Maher of MIT Press. It basically talks about all that stuff. Another groundbreaking thing, which I had nothing to do with indirectly, but we designed the Amiga so that it could genlock. It could actually sense other video signals and align its timing with them. And we brought some of those signals to that special purpose 23-pin D video connector on the back of the machine. And that enabled people to build the video toaster. So you could take live video or stuff off of a VHS tape or whatever you were doing and mix it with what the Amiga could do. So it could lay down, you know, synthetic video on top of live stuff. So as an aside, Amiga equipment was still living in the weather room departments at TV stations around the world because they could, you know, green screen a map of the weather and superimpose the person standing in front of it and all this synthetic stuff at the same time. It took quite a while before people built video systems that allow you to genlock a PC or a Mac. They used to have Amigas just for that.
Yeah. And would you say that there's anything the Amiga set out to do that still hasn't been done today?
I don't know if it's been done now. Dave Morse was thinking about wanting to have interactive cartoons to be able to compose stories in real time. And modern computers do that, but it's like they're way too complicated. You know, an Amiga, a PlayStation 3, for example, has a processor in it called the Cell, and it has one general purpose processor and 8 rendering engines. So it has 8 machines that do an extended version of what the Amiga could do the first time, a long time earlier. And it takes so much effort to get these things. They can render the zits on your face if you've got them. You know, one of these things could look at a picture of me and they could render me. The question is, Nolan Bushnell used to tell us that the best games are easy to learn and difficult to master. They reward the first quarter, they reward the 100th quarter. And where I'm going with this is you have all this graphics capability, but it's not necessarily connected to the story, to what is it that engages people? What is it that causes people to invest themselves emotionally in the avatar on the screen, no matter how simple it is? Because back in the 70s and 80s, those avatars were pretty simple. You know, they were pixel-like things. If you've ever seen the movie Wreck-It Ralph, you kind of know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to see more effort, creative effort, put into writing interactive stories of whatever resolution that connect to the users.